also Nina finally, capitulated, I guess.
Yeah, I don't know. Maybe they, they're like, I'm sure that they're convinced that the deck was stacked against them or whatever, but
Well,
it was
yeah,
a little presumptuous, I guess.
right. Hey, Linda.
Hi there. Wait.
Hey,
Yep.
Linda, Mike.
Mike's here. That's good.
Okay, now I'm on. Okay.
Mary's going to be late. She had a run-in with a bathtub.
Oh, really?
It was. She said she had an accident. She called me and she says, "You're not going to believe this." She was doing an off ramp somewhere, and she go on the off ramp. She pulled off the off ramp, and there was a bathtub in the middle of the off ramp, and she couldn't go to either side because there was. So she ran into it. Then she had to go back to Westchester and make a claim. But that's pretty funny that what'd you have? It's a 1942 cast iron 5-foot.
No, my bathroom story is interesting. I had mice. We thought it was mice. It ended up being rats in the house, and I heard them in the wall, and I knocked on the wall, and they disappeared. And I was brushing my teeth, and I heard them in the ceiling of the bathroom. So I threw the lid down on the toilet, and I stepped up on the toilet, lid, and I slammed on the ceiling. And about the third time I hit, the lid broke, and both feet went and got stuck in the bottom of the toilet. And I started.
Your feet? Did you say feet?
My feet in the toilet because the lid broke. I went in and I fell over backwards, grabbed the towel bar, and there I was.
Boy, there's great stories.
I went into school that day trying to explain why I had a sprained toe, and it generated a lot of laughter.
So run in with the toilet.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
Okay, so we've had a run in with the bathtub and a run in with the toilet.
Separate days and decades even. This was decades ago.
Oh. And well, so Mary's going to be late.
Yeah, we got that.
We'll wait a few more minutes and I'll explain about what happened with
Adriana. Okay.
Yeah.
Good questions, by the way, that list.
Yes.
Yeah.
I still do wish that something about the size of that auditorium could be included, because it's just the scope.
Well, it can be. It's not, this process is underway. This process has not stopped.
Okay, good.
Anything that we're, doing here, we'll have to find out. One question I have is, what's the appropriate point and the appropriate venue that we use to express our opinions? Right now, we're in a questioning. These are questions. These aren't, this is a question about the empathy. This is a question about, open space. All these are questions. None of these are directives, nor our opinion. We're just trying to gather information so that we can let me finish. So we can form an opinion. So you're saying, I wish this could happen. Well, maybe it can't. It hasn't. Your suggestion is relevant. And, the question is, it isn't like this is finished yet. This is in its early stages.
No, I tried to avoid opinions because that seems to me to be too subjective. I was trying to include aspects of the DGEIS and compare, say, for instance, what's going on at the auditorium at the Fisher Center, much smaller, and that kind of thing. So
I think it would be a good thing to do some visuals on this. I mean, we're hearing all these statistics and everything, but relative to the amphitheater, let's have a picture of what a 5,000 seat auditorium looks like. Let's have a picture of what it looks like at SPAC or at MVP Arena, or I don't know if those are like sizes. I'm just pulling those out of the air. Let's see what that looks like, and not only using words, so that we can really have perspective on it. Because you can do this little drawing and you can say, the guys can say, oh, we'll put stoplights here and there. But let's have a picture of what that looks like to give people the impact. And I'm not saying for or against. I'm just saying, let's see what we're talking about in visual terms, because a lot of these considerations are visual. You know, it's not just a statistic here and there. We're wondering about what the visual impact's going to be on our community, and you can't do that in words. You've got to do that in, I feel. Yeah,
Well,
it's better
the
done in
other-
pictures.
And I wanted to understand why they chose those particular sites for those particular aspects of their 5-part design scheme. So it'd be interesting to know, like, why that park will be where they're thinking about it in that area. It's sort of an area, right? Or did they explain that and I missed it?
Well, I don't know. I don't know if that.
Yes, I mean, there's environmental stuff, there's wetlands, there's all sorts of things that come into play here.
Yeah.
Hey, Kevin, did you give a call-in number on the, Mary McNamara just texted me and wants to know if there's a call-in number.
I can find that and forward that to her right now.
Okay, great. I'll
Thank
tell
you.
her that.
Yeah, Skip, you're talking about being visual, and that's how I am too. I'm very visual. And I think question I sent in was, I would like an overlay, because I just need to get a sense of what the size of that is compared to the village, Berkeley Heights, something in the town of Saugerties with which we're familiar, and overlay that Winston Farm area, you know, or even parts of it, you know, so that you get a sense of how big it is.
Yep.
I tried to look at Appendix M, which is you know, it was, I thought it might be more helpful, but I still couldn't really, they would just seem to be scattered pictures without much context. So I think we need more.
Mhm.
Okay, well, let's start the meeting. Mary's going to be late because she had an accident, and I guess Zach's here. Hey, Zach. He said he was going to be late, but he's here. So.
Hey, everybody.
Hey, Zach.
Hi.
So we can get started. There's no guests, I guess. So overall, what's happening is that Adriana was going to come tonight and, you know, address our questions. But what happened is that she's making comment to the town board. And she thought that by this meeting, those comments and that, you know, recommendations would be at the town board. And she doesn't feel it's appropriate that we get it before the town board, you know, that we answer questions. So the town board's going to get it and they'll have it by October 4th. Maybe Zach can comment on this or not, or maybe.
Yeah, October 4th was Adriana's proposed deadline. We very well may have it prior to that, but nonetheless, we're expecting by close of business next Friday.
So we decided she didn't think it was really appropriate. You know, she said that many of our questions, I sent her the questions so that she'd have a heads up. And I'm glad I did, because she said a lot of our concerns meld, but she didn't want to really comment on it now until you just till the town board. And I think that's appropriate too. So we're going to put it off till the next meeting. She agreed to do that. She's being very cooperative, but also, you know, she thought this would be to the town board before she got an extension. She took advantage of that extension. So it'll be October 4th. But we can look at our questions. You know, Mike and I kind of went over them and kind of collated. There was a bunch that were simple, you know, similar. So we collated and we can look at those. But let's take care of the minutes first here. So Mary sent some corrections in. My correction is that on the first page there, it says the group discussed a town proposal. Actually, it was a community campaign. Did you get that? I sent that to you, Kevin.
Yeah,
Okay,
I saw that. Yeah.
Okay, and Mary made some comments. Does anybody else have comments on the minutes, or can we?
Yes,
Okay.
just one typo under the CEC update on the end of the first line. It says she repotted, and I think it's supposed to be reported. So there's
Yeah,
just a
right.
typo there and reported. That's the only thing I picked up.
And apologies to
I take
Ms.
that.
Gray, where I spelled her name wrong.
Right. Okay, so with those corrections, can we pass the minutes?
Yeah.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we got that out of the way. Okay, so again, I explained what's happening with Adriana. I sent out with the agenda our questions. Open for discussion.
Well, can we, just so that it's organized somewhat, can we just simply go through the questions that everybody has in order? So we don't just jump around to different things?
Sure, sure.
And the other thing, I know Elizabeth made that comment about the amphitheater, but it came in late,
Oh, sure.
so we certainly can talk about it tonight. I have some feelings about it, but we could do it in order, and that way it'll
Okay,
be able, and then add anything on.
right. Ken had, Ken put in a comment that's actually pretty broad, and we can, I want to address that because there are places we can go to look at what you've asked, Ken. But let's go. Mike suggested we go through this. So does everybody have those questions in front of them?
Looking for them.
I have,
They were attached.
right.
Mhm.
Uh,
Yeah, I have.
Do you know when they were sent? What day? Because I'm
The
not in my
23rd.
work.
2 days ago, right?
Oh, yeah, that's
The
what I'm looking.
23rd around 5 o'clock.
Okay, thank you. I think this might be it. No, no.
I'm
Search.
saving printing even. I'm viewing them
Yeah,
on my,
I have 'em.
I split my screen up, so.
Yeah,
You can search by me as sender or with attachments. There should be 5 attachments.
Yeah.
mhm.
Right.
Yep, that's how I got them. Thank you, Kevin.
Wait a minute, I gotta take this.
By the way, is Mary okay?
Yeah, she was explaining to us, she was on an off ramp
Yes.
and couldn't move over, and there was a cast iron bathtub in front of her on the highway.
Whoa. So that's what precipitated the toilet. Got it.
Yeah, oh, that's right. The toilet story would not, without the context, would not make sense.
Well, I thought you
But it
guys
was-
were just talking about incidents. And you were, and
No,
you were.
it was funny. It was funny. Well, and hers wasn't funny, I don't think, but mine was
There you go.
funny.
I'm on the line. I gotta take this line.
Okay.
Okay.
Hello, Bill Barr.
Hi, how you guys doing?
Good.
Good.
Oh, Bill,
Yes.
Hey, Bill.
we're about to discuss some of the questions that were going to be for Adriana. She's not present. Skip can fill you in on that, but I will send to you an email right now with those questions so you can review as we're going along.
Oh, great. Thank you, Kevin.
Okay. So do we want to start with these questions?
Yes.
About
Go
open
ahead,
space?
moderate.
Okay, so what is the DGEIS's definition of open space? Does it include the terms undisturbed, contiguous, non-fragmented land? Does it include the half acre per residential lot to reach the required figure for open space?
That's what I was most curious about, but this phrases it much better than I tried to.
Mhm.
Yeah, that's good.
Yep.
Okay. We want to add or subtract? Okay, number 2 under open space. Under section 627A, the applicant claims 583 acres, 71.9% of open space in their preferred plan, SP. That's SP means sponsored preferred plan. The map for SP shows only 227 acres, 27% allocated to open space. Can you explain the discrepancy?
Yeah,
Might be explained by one. Yeah.
that popped out at me in the body of the GDIS. They claim 71% with their preferred plan. And when you look at the map, it's not 71%. It's not anywhere near it. So
I think-
you have to find out if that is really the preferred plan. Where on the map is that continuous non-fragmented land?
Contiguous.
I'm
Contiguous.
looking, I can't find my notes on that now, but I recall that there were two areas for residential development, and together they did add up to about that many acres. So could it be that they're talking about those two? I don't have it all in front of me, so I can't say for certain.
I think Mike's referring to open space and you're referring
Right.
to residential.
I think
Yeah.
that's part of the
Okay,
discrepancy though,
gotcha,
Skip.
gotcha.
My interpretation is that, like you said, very, very simply, what's being defined as open space is our
Yep.
backyards being considered a portion of that,
Right.
et cetera.
If you look at the town, what they quote as the town's definition in the zoning code
Yes.
as open space, it includes land that has been graded or landscaped, but is kept open. And it sounds like it could be part of a plot that a house is built on, as long as it's, what's the
Yeah.
distance, 100 feet from the house or 50 feet from the house? It sounds, I'm thinking they're including parts of yards.
That
As
sounds
it would have to.
fragmented to me.
We have to
Yeah.
clear that up because the first
Yep.
question covers that because
Yep.
Yeah.
one of the terms is undisturbed.
Yeah.
Geographically, I don't see how they could accomplish that many acres without that being included.
No, it's geometrically impossible.
Okay, so anyway,
Yeah.
that's one of the questions we're asking.
Mhm.
Okay.
Yep.
Right.
So now this includes some of that. Number 3 under open space, alternate 3, traditional neighborhood developments. There was, okay, let me read it all. Traditional neighborhood development offers 75% of open space while preserving wooded areas. Will this alternative or any other alternative, I think there's 7 alternatives to the plans, be considered as an option for zoning change? While there is a map of the TND, that is the traditional neighborhood design, its parameters were not evaluated, or at least not mentioned in the DGEIS. Please explain why it was admitted while extensive information was provided on as of right. As of right means what they can do right now without any zoning change.
Zoning. Mhm.
Right.
Then there was a reasonable worst case scenario. That's the worst thing they could do there under their circumstances. And then there was the sponsors preferred. If you go through the DGIS, those 3 were extensively overviewed. A lot of statistics were given for them, a lot of numbers and sizes and stuff, but only for those 3 and not for the TND. Although the TND, there was a map given for that. And then there was a bunch of other alternatives that not even maps were given for. But the TND is quite, if you look at that map, that really shows a 75% open space alternative. It still shows how well, let me go on. Let me see, sponsors, okay. The TND seems to be a plan worthy of consideration, being that it seemed to meet criteria for open space, provide housing, recreation, entertainment, and other accommodations while producing a lower environmental, aesthetic, and other impacts, which would give it wide appeal. So that's kind of editorializing. I don't know, that's not a straight question, but it is a question about why it wasn't further developed in the DGIS when it seems like, if you look at everybody's wants on this, it seems like it might be a good compromise.
Was T&D the option 6?
No, it was option 4.
It was alternate 3.
It was alternate 3, but it was option 4. As you go through the DGEIS, first thing came, it was as of right, reasonable worst case, SP, and then TND was mentioned. So
Okay.
it's 4 in one category and 3 in the alternatives.
Well, under the maps, it's the 4th map.
Yes, that's right. Yes.
Under the alternatives, it's alternative 3.
Right.
Yeah, and I think alternative 6 had a map too. And that was no building above 250 feet mean sea level.
Yeah, that's an alternative, yeah.
I
Which
didn't see a
looks-
map for that. We'll have to check
It
that
is,
out.
it's interesting. It's confusing because it's a map on the page with alternate 7. But the map applies to alternate 6.
Okay. So anyway, that's our third question. That includes that kind of editorial in it.
I guess my main question is, can any of these alternatives be requested by the town in order to provide the zoning? That is,
And what you
we
mean
don't
by
have-
that is an analysis like the other three.
We don't necessarily have to go along with this, with the
Right.
preferred
First three.
plan.
Right.
So I don't know. You know.
So what you're asking is that they have the same analysis as the first three did.
Mhm.
Is
For-
that what you're asking?
Yeah, at
Okay,
least.
okay. I just want to be clear on what it meant by considered. It seems like they were thrown in there, but there's no way to consider them against the other three that they gave all the statistics for. So it seems like they were just thrown in there because
Mhm.
someone said there had to be alternatives.
Mhm.
Can you comment on that, Zach?
Skip, I'm sorry. Can you repeat that? I was just walking in the door with the baby. Sorry.
We were wondering if there are a number of alternatives. They analyze quite deeply the three, the AOS, the worst case scenario, and the SP. They give a lot of statistics on that. They give a map on the TND, and then there's several other alternatives that they just kind of give a summary of.
Right.
Mike's asking, can those other alternatives be considered or be analyzed to the extent that the first three were, so somebody can take those into consideration?
Sure. I don't see why that's a reasonable request. I don't see why that couldn't take place. Again, I think that's reasonable.
Okay,
Let me make a note of that. Sorry.
right. Again, we can approach Adriana about this,
Mhm.
and maybe she has a perspective on it, but I wanted to
And
include the
she's
town
been-
board's view on that.
Yeah, and she's been, I think that's something that I myself would like. I feel like the majority of the board would like to have those options available and detailed. And Adriana has been a tremendous advocate for the process of this. So I can't imagine that she wouldn't be, she wouldn't assist with that.
Okay, great. Good. All right, great. Okay, number 4 under open space. How do conservation subdivisions currently in the zoning law apply to the open space requirements of the project? So there's certain concepts in conservation things, putting land into conservation easement that are mentioned in the comprehensive plan. And how does that relate to the open space on this property? I mean, when they say open space, are they going to put a conservation easement on it? I mean, this was one of Mary's questions, and she could elucidate that, but she's not here right now. But that's how I take it. Is there going to be conservation easements on this open space so it remains in conservation in perpetuity, rather than just being open space now and maybe being changed later? I assume that that's what she's driving at, but I'm not sure.
Well, it looks to me like she's saying, does the current zoning law on conservation subdivisions apply to this project?
Right.
Or are they going to be adjusted?
Okay, that would relate to also a question about that there's a requirement, depending on how you interpret it in the comprehensive plan, somewhere between 50 and 70% of any large division, you have to do that.
Right.
And in the 3 plans they analyze, it doesn't seem like that's there.
So they would be.
Fred said at one of the meetings that the current zoning, the 2-acre zoning, does not include any requirement for open space. So if that is a fallback in any, I don't think they're going to fall back to that. But if it was, how does the comprehensive plan relate to that? I mean, how can he say, we got a comprehensive plan that said any large things have to have between 50 and 70%, depending how you interpret it. But how can the current zoning ignore that?
Well, my understanding of conservation subdivision is that it's an alternative that the developers can use as long as if they add a whole lot more space, and I forget the percentages that are involved in that, they get one more house for every 10.
Okay, so that,
They
well,
get
that's,
a few more houses, so that's the incentive. And that would allow us to have more open space.
Right.
okay. So that question's for it. But just to back up to what Linda and I guess, are pointing out is there is current zoning that we really don't want because of the amount of houses on it. And it was been said by at least Fred and some other people that the current zoning would not be required to have open space. How can that be? How can that be? So that's a question. It's not, I don't have an answer. But Fred said, no, if they fall back and use the current zoning, they could put 400 houses up there and strip malls, and there would be no provision required for open space. But then we have a comprehensive plan that says we've got to have 50 to 70% of open space.
In a large property.
And large property. So that's another question. We didn't write it down here because it wasn't directly involved in the DGIS, but it is a question. I mean, it's highly unlikely that they're going to do a fallback and say, to hell with this, we're taking the zoning we got, we're putting 400 houses up. It's highly unlikely they're going to do that. But, okay, so the second.
Fred, can I just pop in for a second?
Sure.
Fred had talked a lot about Eastdale, which is down in Poughkeepsie, which is a traditional neighborhood development, which is mentioned in this document. Skip and I went down there. We weren't too impressed with that particular development because they don't really have any land. And so, but the concept of a traditional neighborhood development is on the books. It has been done, and Fred seemed to be using that as a model for what might be in the Winston Farm. So I think I got very interested in that, in the that option, which is in that map 4, because personally, my main feeling is the more open space you have, the less impact you have. The less infrastructure you have, the less need for water, then the less need for energy. And so that's my main bug, is to find that project that is going to afford us the most open space. And the other thing that I noticed, which is what Bill was talking about, is I noticed on some of the maps, they do say open space. And in other areas, they say conservation zone. And a conservation zone might be like these little parks in between houses, but that's not open space in my mind.
No. That's why we got to answer that first question.
Yeah, so I think we have to be very strong on our definition of what open space is.
So any more comments on open space?
Elizabeth has her hand up.
Okay, Elizabeth, you're muted. Elizabeth, you're muted. Elizabeth, you're muted.
Okay,
Elizabeth, you're muted.
You remuted yourself.
Elizabeth, you're muted.
am I muted
Now-
now?
No,
No.
you're good now. You're good now.
I agree with what Mike was saying, that and I hadn't frankly never heard of the traditional neighborhood development. Maybe I hadn't read the alternative section of the DGEIS carefully enough, but depending on how that's done, I think it could it could create more open space. And in my brief conversation by phone with Fred, he said that the whatever happens, they have to abide by the comprehensive plan and the open space plan. I mean, the open space plan is quite old now. It was done in 2010, but they still have to abide by it. So, but I think your point about the conservation easement is important. We have one on our land, and basically it can't be no more buildings except barns, and so on can be, and it can't be transferred without the easement. So, you know, these are all good questions.
Mhm.
Any more comments on open space? Okay, so we're going to go to climate change now.
Darryl,
I'm sorry.
Carol.
I was just thinking that the conservation subdivision and conservation easements are very different. So I think maybe we should define what you mean by that, Elizabeth.
Okay. All right, so that was one of Mary's questions, and she was, you know, she's quite knowledgeable on that. Let's defer to her when she gets there and see what she actually means about that. And we can, you know, put it also to Adriana, and she will certainly be knowledgeable of that and maybe be able to explain, you know, I mean, that's why we're having her here to explain, you know, what a lot of this stuff means. So that would be a pertinent question for her.
Skip, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I don't know if you saw Mary just emailed the group saying that she won't be making tonight's meeting due to her incident.
Okay. I didn't see that. Oh, too bad. Okay. Anyway, so let's go on to climate change. Does the DGEIS demonstrate compliance with the 2019 New York Climate Leadership and Community Protection Act? Will the town require compliance with that act to provide a zoning change?
Good question.
And that's where it requires that by 2030, I think it's 40% of energy be produced by renewables, and by, I forget what this, 70% by 2050. In other words, it's going to be hard to say because it kind of is a reduction thing, but is this development going to be in compliance and work with this plan? That's the question.
I
It's
think
also a green building.
Well,
New
yeah,
buildings.
there's,
Yeah.
yes.
If they're acts and they're required, then they have to, whether it's in the DGIS or not.
Mhm.
I don't know how it impacts everything else, but they have to.
Well, again, Adriana being a planner maybe can explain that interplay, but that's, you know, that's part of our purview is, you know, climate, you know, resiliency. So
A great question.
if the question she may say they've got to comply, but that act that's what they want the state to do. But I don't know if there's any specific requirements within that would guide this, and that would be the question.
Yeah, that I think is, I had a question of whether or not they would be including solar panels for the houses that they're building, or solar panels for any of the buildings. And I think that would fall right into that, you know, and I saw no mention of that, you know, and if they're going to just, you know, give it out to somebody else to contract it out, is there going to be a requirement? I mean, I know of developments in the town of Dwaynesburg, or not right in Schenectady County, where I recently moved from 8 years ago, but I've been up there, and they have entire developments of condos. They're all solar. So, you know, it can be done. And then
Well,
I've seen,
this next question might partially address that, because it has to do with mitigation.
yeah,
So given substantial threats of climate change and its massive scope, thus effect on the project, what's your assessment of the mitigation plans, and are they adequate? Part of those mitigation plans would be solar panels instead of, you know, pulling off the grid, having solar panels. If they're creating so much greenhouse gas by creating all these houses, a mitigation would be solar panels or wind or whatever, whatever.
Yeah, their mitigation plans seem to only focus on the land, the water, that kind of thing. So I didn't
Well,
see any.
I think that's the reason for the question.
Yep.
The question
Yep.
is
Yep.
presupposing that they don't have any mitigation plan for, energy use.
Right.
Yeah.
Skip, I'm sorry.
Let's do the raise hand thing, okay?
I'm not, I don't have you guys on I've opened up something that I have been doing, which was putting out some concerns, and it might impact what was just said. It's under a section called Impact to Utility Facilities. And what it says was based on data, there is insufficient capacity in the existing Central Hudson Electric substation feeders to serve the project site. And then they say this deficiency in capacity will be addressed at a later time. So
We
what
have that
they're
question in
saying
here, Mike.
right now is Central Hudson can't supply the electricity for the full build out of this project. And my feeling is, well, if Central Hudson can't supply it, then the project is going to have to supply it. And that's where we get into solar voltaics. So right now they're saying we can't get enough electricity to serve the whole project.
And we have a question. Here's how our question was framed. Section 6.9.2.1 indicates that based on the data, there's insufficient capacity in existing Central Hudson substation feeders to serve the project at full build out. Will this shortfall limit build out allowed by any zoning change?
Oh, I'm
Or
sorry.
how will the deficiency be remedied? Or will on-site production be required to ensure full capacity before a zoning change is given?
So,
Yeah.
I would love to see something about net zero, which would also help with the same situation.
Right.
And I don't know if we can, I don't know how to encourage that, how to put that into a policy requirement.
Well,
they also say in the program that they kind of push towards residential areas being solar, but that the larger buildings might not be able to be solar. And I question that.
So should we include that in that second question under climate change about mitigation, suggesting that net zero should be, required?
Yeah.
And okay, so we'll add that to that question.
I don't think there should be any natural gas lines on the property.
Absolutely. Should be, no, I'm serious.
There's no reason to have natural gas there.
At this point, the New York State does not want to see us be using anything but electric.
So do you know about the current state of that bill, something about the buildings bill that limits new building on gassing? Did that pass? And is that within the time frame of building out on Winston Farm?
I don't know anything about that one.
Okay, I'll find out from Sarah Ann.
Okay.
Because there was a bill that was going to require that. I don't know if it passed or not.
Require, like I said, can you state it again?
It was required that no new gas in new buildings, no gas lines be put in.
Right.
I mean, that's a real rough synopsis of it, but the idea was that no new gas would be used. And people were flipping out. You're going to take my gas stove away. You're going to take my gas stove away.
Me too.
So anyway.
Induction stoves.
Linda.
Okay, so
Linda.
and we talked about climate change, and this is
Linda.
the thing about trees. Number 3 under climate change. What, if any, requirements will the town propose regarding the removal of healthy trees to ensure adequate carbon sequestration?
Linda's got a question, Skip.
Go ahead, Linda.
On the what you had just asked, I looked it up, and what I found, and I'd have to check this too. It says blah, 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 about the installation of fossil fuel equipment in building systems are all phased in by building height. The prohibition starts in 2026 for new buildings up to 7 stories tall, except for commercial and industrial buildings larger than 100,000 square feet. That
And
was
that's-
May of last year. That was May of last year, so I don't know if there's something more current.
was that passed?
That, yeah, as of May of last year, but I don't know, I'd say anything more current.
But it goes
I'd have
into
to-
effect in 2026, which will probably be
Right around
at
that
least
time.
that for build out.
Okay.
So no, this is buildings under seven stories, which will
For
be.
new buildings up to 7 stories tall, except for commercial and industrial larger than 100,000 square feet.
So commercials under 100,000 still will have no gas.
Except for,
Okay,
Why did they
prohibition,
allow larger?
okay.
Why is it allowed in larger structures?
Well, let's not
That's
go
not-
into.
that's not relevant
Let's
to
not
us
go
now,
into
yeah.
that. Let's
yeah.
stay on the DGEAI. Okay,
Well, I think
so the
that's.
thing
an
about the
important-
trees,
Important thing.
how do you want to
yeah.
suss that question out anymore? Because in one place, they said there's not going to cut down anything but sick or dying trees. But then you look at the SP map and their houses all over the hill there.
Mhm.
They got to cut down trees to
Yep.
do that. So there's
Oh, yeah.
another, they say one thing and then the map shows something else.
Yeah.
So I think that's what that question is aiming at. I mean, if you're going to put those, and most of those are the big, estate kind of houses.
Mhm.
Okay.
So is there a way to understand what our baseline is for carbon sequestration right now versus what the impact would be for each one of these?
I'm sure that somebody could take them, they could do an analysis of the number of trees on, there's studies, I think they had to do studies of how many trees are
Right.
there and
I didn't
convert
know.
it to how much stuff is being sequestered. And then figure out if you're going to cut down all those trees, how much is left. I'm sure there's a way to do
Yeah,
that.
there should be, right. So
I know there might even
Okay.
be, that's another question.
Yeah.
To add to that, how to figure it. Okay. So how to figure out how much sequestration is happening now and figuring out how they're going to put all those houses in without cutting down any trees, unless they're going to make tree houses.
Or,
They'd have to make a lot
is
of
there
them.
is there another way to balance? Okay, we have to cut 10 trees down, so that takes care of greenhouse gas emissions. So how are we going to minimize that much less greenhouse gas emissions to balance that if we cut down 10 trees? Anyway, I don't know.
Okay,
how
that can all be included in that. I mean, that question doesn't specifically state all that stuff, but it's implied
Mhm.
that, how are you going to mitigate
Right.
this sequestration?
Yeah.
So number 4 under climate change is, will LEED standards, that's
Mhm.
building standards, be required as mentioned in alternative 7? Alternative 7 mentions that heavily, but it's not mentioned in any other alternative, which seems weird to me. To provide energy conservation as a condition of zoning change.
Nicole Roscoe says, I have a number for the sequestration. She
Okay.
puts in the notes.
Nicole, do you have a number for current sequestration on the Winston Farm now? Nicole, are you with us?
Look in the chat.
Hi, I'm here. Sorry, I'm here. Yeah, I'm here. I just got home from work. So, yeah, I did that. I worked hard on figuring out that how much was being sequestered, and but I don't have that here with me right now.
But it
So
is,
it's just something-
but it is available.
Yeah,
Okay,
I mean, it's like a formula,
right.
a math
So we could use
problem.
that, we could use that formula to figure out if they cut out, 100 acres of trees to put, houses in.
Yeah,
know
we
how-
can figure out how much.
Okay, great,
Yeah.
good, fantastic.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
I just have to look for it in my. I'll get it to you guys when I
Okay.
find it.
So about the LEED
All right,
standard,
thanks.
so it's basically a question, are you going to use LEED standards? And is the town going to require, or whoever require, that LEED standards be used for construction Basically, that's the question, as a condition of zoning change. Okay?
Mhm.
Water supply. According to the statements in the document, current test wells provide a combined 270 gallons per minute, but would not supply the needs of a full build out. That's all, contained in their statements, in their narrative. It states another well will have to be drilled so that independent water system, It states that another well will have to be drilled to have an independent water system, unless, as mentioned also in the narrative, there is a connection to the village water supply. This implies that currently they cannot supply necessary water. Will a contract with the village for water by the applicant be an acceptable part of a zoning change if a second well is not provided? In other words, if they have to hook up to the village system, which is already stressed, will that be a non-starter for a zoning change?
Good question.
Well, based on what we saw with the last contract with the village is getting tougher and tougher in terms of holding on to their water.
Right.
The system is getting stressed. So I don't know that they would be able to hook into the village system. So they would have to build another well.
Right.
I don't, Mike, I agree. I don't really see that being a viable option between
Right.
what the village is charging now for, just us as customers. The rates have gone up, and like you said, that system is very stressed. I don't see how why they would even entertain that.
Right.
So we got 3 questions here. I don't know who was first. Ken, you're up in the upper left. So
Okay, yep, that's why I am on mine as well. At the town board meeting where an engineer for the owners presented, he made it very clear, at least at that time, that they would have all the water they needed without having to take any of the water that the town is using or any water from the village. Now, that may have changed over time, but that's what he made very clear at the time. They would have sufficient water on their own. So I think we need to get clarification
yes,
of whether that statement was after this version of the DGEIS or whether the DGEIS is the most current version of what water they will use and need.
right. Okay. Bill?
Yeah, are you all aware of the letter of intent between the developers and the village? Specifically, John Mullen and Mayor Murphy?
No.
Yeah.
Go ahead,
Okay.
outline it.
Okay. Well, I just had it here in front of me. It says Socrates Farms LLC is in the process of developing a development plan for these lands and is considering several infrastructure plans. These lands already accommodate an existing water well possessing water capacity on order of magnitude, which is planned to be utilized for development plan purposes, provided that Socrates Farms LLC, this is critical, retains all necessary well water rights to the water source situate on its lands. It is Socrates Farms LLC intent, it's not a good sentence, is to work with the village of Socrates and its hydrogeologist consultant to allow property acquisition and construction of a groundwater production well at a mutually acceptable location. And then it said in the 21-22 construction season. So followed, it said, then it says this letter of intent shall be superseded by a contract of sale in order to effectuate a binding agreement by the undersigned parties. So just thought you ought to know about that.
Okay, so there seems to be a difference between what Mike found in the DGEIS and other statements and other agreements. In other words, in the DGEIS, it seems like they're saying they don't have enough water, but in other statements, it seems like they're gonna have an excess, even that they can sell it to the village. Is that correct?
Yeah, let me just, I omitted something. It's up at the top. The lead paragraph said, Socrates Farms LLC is the landowner of the former Winston Farms Center Farm parcels. Hereby expresses its intent to work cooperatively with the village of Socrates in order to sell a parcel of land and establish an associated permanent non-exclusive easement for constructing a groundwater production well and underground piping to the village, connect to the village's water transmission main.
So maybe that what they're referring to is the second well in the DGEIS.
Yeah, it would be
Yeah.
connected to the village water system. But then he says, this is all, they will retain all rights to it. Pardon me.
Okay, well, so we should be clear, then the question, we should be clear on what water really exists. Just like we've got to be clear on what open space is, we got to be clear on whether they really have enough water. In one sense, they say they can sell the water to the village, and in another sense, they said they got to build a second well. Maybe building that second well is what they're going to supply the water. But it's very unclear whether they have, at this point, without a well, they don't have enough water. What is the intent there? And what's the reality there?
Important question.
Okay,
When-
Linda?
Yeah, I was gonna draw the connection between the water and the electricity, if Central Hudson can't supply it and the village can't supply it, that's two utilities that you need, so they're shy on both. Basically.
Carol?
I was wondering if they're referring to the pipeline that comes from the reservoir here off of our road, Van Vleerden Road. Because that pipeline takes water all the way to the village and it goes through Winston Farm. Are they trying to take control of that? I'm not sure what they're referring to.
Oh,
They being the
They,
sponsors.
Mullen.
Yeah, okay. Mike?
Yeah, no, just reiterating, we have to get very clear as to
Yeah.
is this project providing water to the village, or are they requiring water from the village?
Right.
And it's very murky to me.
Better not be murky. It's got to be clean water, doesn't it?
There is
Mary?
there is a pipeline connecting, going out to the Holiday Inn Express, I think.
Mary, did you have a question?
You're muted.
Sorry about that. I read that they're required to have a second backup source of water. So they will be required to have a second well if they're not connected to the village water supply.
Right.
And that's separate from whether or not they have enough water supply. And then you are aware that of the 270 gallons per minute, 50 of them are coming from the Montano site.
Yes.
And the Montano site can only be used if they get an easement from the property to the south, because at the moment that well is too close to the southern property line.
That's interesting. So they
Okay,
may not
anybody,
have that
anything else
50.
on water?
I would just repeat what Mike Hoff has said over and over, that they will not sell water to this project.
Okay.
Who won't?
So the next was, I think we already did this, the impact on the utilities. That is the Central Hudson issue of not having enough electricity. So we went over that once. So then we went to housing. Will the town require a certain percentage of housing to be dedicated to affordable workforce or senior housing?
Mhm.
So it's a question. Do we want to add or subtract to that question? Okay. So those are the ones we had, we added a little bit of variety to them, a little bit of breadth to them. So we can go on now if there's things that haven't been covered. If
Well,
everybody wants to suggest other things.
Yes. Yes, I just, I think we discussed it briefly earlier, but I think it would be helpful to have a map. I downloaded maps of the Sosnos Amphitheater at Bard, and which is seats 800, and another theater, the Luma Theater, that, you know, seemed, in other words, if we had visual, if we had visuals of the desired scope of the amphitheater, and then ones that are huge, like, you know, seating 5,000, I think it would be helpful. So,
Okay. So maps and pictures of amphitheaters so as to compare.
right.
Okay. Linda?
Yeah, another one, in line with one with maps. Again, I really would like to see an overlay, and maybe we could create that ourselves. I don't know, of the size of Winston Farms compared to areas that we're familiar with here and now. And then also, I don't know if it's within the scope of the project to determine the effect on anything outside. You know, you can put up all the traffic lights you want up there, but that doesn't mitigate the traffic on 9W down here, you know, south of the project or whatever. And how does it affect the village, you know, and the businesses? I'm not sure how that can be addressed.
So that's not, so in other words, the question is, there are extensive traffic studies. And you're asking if they go as far as to
Helpful.
consider the effect on the village, Berkeley Heights, you know, farther up.
Yep, places further out from just that concentrated central area.
You know, selfishly, I agree with Linda. Looking over the draft documents that we got from the developers, one of my biggest concerns is the traffic. Being in the
Mhm.
Berkeley Heights area, there's times where, unless I leave for work at 5 o'clock in the morning, God forbid I have to make a left-hand turn because it's
Yes.
impossible.
Yep.
It's
And
impossible.
I've been here 8 years, and it's gotten,
Yep.
I can't believe the change in those 8 years.
It's remarkable. And the draft the analysis that we got regarding the traffic, I'm not a DOT expert by any means, but I don't think that they're adequate. I think that they're not as extensive as they should be.
So
I would
we're
agree.
there. So our question then is, what's the effect on outlying areas? And does that traffic study consider those and describe those?
And not just the traffic, but parking down in the village. You know, if you're going shopping, it's already tough. You know, and how many hundred more cars you're going to add to that?
Okay, Carol?
Two things. One was, I know about 10 years ago, I think we did a little traffic study about how to work 9W a little better. And they talked about traffic circles, and that might make it so you can make a left turn by going around a traffic circle and turning around. But anyway,
I would
that's
really like to see pictures of those, because they mentioned traffic circles and then they mentioned the areas. And I'm saying,
They'd have to put it through a cemetery here. I mean, there's no
right,
place.
I mean,
Well,
where are they gonna
there-
put those
yeah.
circles?
I don't know. I don't remember there
Yeah,
was a way to do it. And of course, people didn't like circles back then. I think we're getting more and more used to it now.
Yeah.
But not really. Some
But
people.
but they do take an incredible amount of space.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what we do, we have that space to actually do that. That's the question.
Yeah.
Oh, that was they did an analysis, and at the time it was possible. I don't know if it is now. And then secondly, I was just up at Lake Placid, and there was the Miracle Ice Arena. I don't know if you guys know about the ice hockey game that was won against the Russians in 1980. So it's called the Miracle Amphitheater. And that amphitheater actually adds to the visuals in some ways. It's a very interesting building. So I don't know if we should worry so much about size yet, but maybe to your point, Elizabeth, we should see this and get a sense of scale. I think that must be at least 5,000 people, if not more. And it didn't look out of place.
Right. That's why we need, I was mentioning visuals before, because
Yeah.
we talk about 800. So Elizabeth provided some visuals. Maybe we need visuals of what 5,000 seat amphitheater looks like. so we can look at it, you know, and say, oh, I want that or don't.
And the
Mike?
parking for that.
Oh, parking, forget it. Mike?
Yes,
Working
there, in the GDIS, there is an alternative 4, which is reduced scale of usage. And under that, it says removes the water park, and they indicate that that was previously done, and the amphitheater. So there is a alternate that would remove the amphitheater. I'm not necessarily suggesting that, but what's interesting is what they say under this alternative is removing the amphitheater would only involve non-peak hours and wouldn't affect the traffic study. I really question that.
Right.
So they're saying they don't have to make any changes in the traffic study the way it is now because that's going to be on a weekend. It's not on peak work hours or something like that. But what you're doing is getting 2,500, 3,000 cars coming in within an hour into that those two throughway entrances. I agree with Zach. I think the traffic study surrounding a building of that size with traffic coming in at one time needs a lot more study.
Yeah, there's going to be residual traffic effects throughout the entire town, not just on that main corridor.
Yeah, no, it's not the town, but boy, around those two set intersections, that would be quite a lot of cars.
I mean, even now on a Friday, you know, you go from Speedway or something going into town and traffic's backed up and I can't figure out where it's going to. I can't imagine even another 100 houses there.
I don't want to beat this to death, but on Friday afternoons when I get off exit 20 and I have to go from the light by Speedway to Price Chopper, sometimes that quarter mile alone, half mile alone takes the better part of 20 minutes.
That's exactly what I'm talking about.
With a train going by.
Yep.
Yeah.
With or without the train.
Right.
Linda?
Yeah, I've almost lost my train of thought. Oh, I think the amphitheater is different. I think the amphitheater, oh yeah, good. The amphitheater is different than what they're proposing now, though. I think they removed the amphitheater and now it's just a concert venue, right? Because I think the amphitheater was like an outdoor.
Now it's an indoor.
No,
but
it's an
still
indoor
5,000
amphitheater.
seats.
Okay, gotcha.
It's
Okay,
indoor 5,000 instead of outdoor, whatever.
okay, got it.
Carol?
I was just thinking about the fact that the Garlic Festival is happening this weekend. And as with any event, it's going to be sporadic. It's not going to be every weekend. And I don't know how we manage that. I do know that I try to stay away from the village at that point. So I'm just curious about, does anybody know?
Well, they travel, you know, what they do is they route it around. They routed People's Road and they route it around the village.
Yep.
But
So
you see how many signs are up, you know.
yeah,
around.
so that affects.
And how many
journeys, yeah.
One of their major expenses is state and county police.
Right.
To direct traffic. So, you know, are you going to do that every time you have a show at the amphitheater? Although you got to say it's, you know, it's 10 to 15,000 people a day rather than 5,000 people.
But that's one weekend a year,
Right.
not every weekend.
Right. But it's also bigger than the, you know,
Yeah.
it's 15,000 people. Well, I know that they claim that they do 30 to 30,000 people in 2 days. So
And they're
15,000
not coming
people.
in at the same time.
Right.
Right. It's a longer, yes.
That's
It's
a
not
longer
as
window.
intense.
Okay, so we need a better traffic study. Okay. Right now, Ken asked some questions, some larger questions about this whole thing, about what's allowed now and what wouldn't be allowed. And I think I saw in a couple of presentations, a zoning map of the current zoning with housing. That's available, Ken. And it shows how many houses would be available. And to compare that to what's going to happen, this PDD, it's in process. The DSI, the final ESI is going to be what determines what the PDD zoning will be, and so determine what can happen there. So we do have an idea of what can happen now, better or worse. And that, if you can't find that map, I'll try to find that map for you. It's, you know, it's pretty well laid out what they can do. What's to come, that's what we're talking about now. So we're trying to control what happens, you know, mitigate what happens. So that would be, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, that would be fine. If you can find that map, I'd appreciate it.
Okay, great. All right.
And
Other questions? Any
yeah, I have
other
a-
issues?
I have a
Carol?
question, and I don't know if we're asking this question or not at this point. Do we think that a PDD is the right way to go? It seems like it allows them a little more flexibility, and I don't know exactly how that impacts us as we, or how we feel about it. I
Well,
don't really understand how this all works.
Well, the PDD is the most, it's touted as the most flexible plan.
Correct, for them.
Well, for all of us. I mean, it's a zoning for all of us. I mean, it's not just zoning for them. We are making the parameters for zoning for Winston Farm. So the PDD, according to the town board, and Zach can comment on this, their request was for a PDD. Yeah, that's true. But it's also seen as the most, you know, flexible. We can go a lot of ways. I mean, there are at least 7 alternatives, all of which would fall under that. And the reason that I believe the reason that that is the case is that the structure of a PDD is to, you know, be flexible and be able to, you know, account for considerations.
I guess the reason that I even question it, because it seemed planned, you know, sounds good, planned development, but there are a lot of people in the conservation, I don't know, there's a lot of people in various towns who have fought against having it because it allowed for large shopping malls to come in. And I'm not sure how that happened or why that happened.
That's why we're doing this.
No, but they had a PDD. And that allowed that to happen. So I'm not sure why that was allowed. I don't know those, and maybe there wasn't enough oversight by committees like ours.
Right, might be. My understanding is that the DGIS puts parameters forward, and that's a result of the seeker process. Then, and Zach can comment on this, the town board actually takes those parameters and creates the zoning. So to answer your question, those shopping malls happen because whatever the agency, in our case, it would be the town board, allowed that to happen.
Mhm.
Yes,
Is that
yeah,
correct, Zach?
That's my understanding.
So the answer to your question was that the town board, if it was the same as our town, created the zoning to let that happen. Okay, any more questions on that? Oh, I'm sorry, Elizabeth?
Well, it seems to me that, yes, it does create more flexibility, but there's also a sense of uncertainty because a number of questions they say, well, we can't describe, I mean, in other words, it's sort of contingent on future conditions in the future. And it just seems too uncertain to me. I know there was a PDD plan for around here where I live. I think Tom Struzzeri suggested it, and the town didn't accept it. This, of course, is a much larger parcel, but it just, in addition to the advantage of flexibility, there does seem to be a lot of uncertainty about the future in this plan.
Well, there is, the town board creates the parameters for the PDD. Those have to go through public hearings.
Okay.
Isn't that correct, Zach? So it isn't like somebody pulls a PDD off the shelf at Costco and puts it in. It's created by the town. And then there are public hearings to comment on that. So there is mechanisms to keep, you know, hopefully, if we have any power at all, keep the thing within the parameters that we want. So shopping malls, no, you know, and I don't think the town is, I don't know, talk to Zach, I don't think he wants it in there. But anyway, there is, it isn't a set, a PDD isn't a set plan. That's why it's optimal to be able to do, because you have the town to be able to create a plan. And then you also have hearings because of the zoning process for the public to make comment on that. Mike?
Yeah, this might be the elephant in the room, but we have to understand that the Winston Farm is not one property, it's 11 properties. And I know when I was reading the GEIS, they talk about the fact that with a PDD, that there has to be some kind of overlay of conformity in terms of what you're doing. And I don't know how that is done or whose responsibility that is. Is it the planning board? So that you're going to have 11 different, possibly 11 different owners.
Yeah.
Not necessarily the developers. And this is something that people have to understand. Maybe these developers and the good folks, but they're mainly site guys, you know, getting the land contoured and putting in infrastructure and stuff like that. John is a builder, but there were 11 different, and I think that's something we have to get really clear from Adriana as to how that works.
So the question is, how does the final DGIS and the PDD deal with 11 different entities, all of which are a little bit different?
And possibly different owners. So how do you
Right.
maintain that overlay of conform that allows all those properties to conform to the zoning?
Or how they have to coordinate to conform.
How
Because
the
they're all,
coordination is my main.
because they're all different properties. So, you know, each of these things we're coming up with, the amphitheater is going to be on a different property than, you
That's
know,
right.
the housing unit. So how does the DGIS or the PDD deal with those? Do they deal with them as 11 different zoning districts, or?
Yeah.
Okay,
Just how do they regulate the development of each of those properties?
of diverse properties, right?
Right.
Bill?
Yeah, just going back to the question about PDD, what they say, what I read about them, and a reason for it is you have a diverse area with different, you know, you're going to have housing, you're going to have commercial. So it's one zoning product that has all of those components to it. I just wanted you to know, you guys, I want to call your attention to page 12 of the DGEIS where it says, I can't remember the heading, but there's a paragraph in there. It says upon the rezoning, the applicants intend to put Winston Farm on the market.
Yeah.
And they're building no infrastructure. There are no plans for infrastructure.
Yeah.
Currently. Okay, I just want to make sure y'all knew about that.
Yep.
That's all.
Sponsors are going to sell it. They're not going to be.
Yeah, I just didn't know if that bared on what you were saying about 11 different owners.
I guess that does. Is it
Yes.
actually in the document that they're not going to be the developers of those 11 properties?
Those two questions go together. It's on the books that they're going to sell it. There's 11 different properties. So how do you create conformity in zoning over those disparate size and conditioned pieces of property?
Yeah.
That's a question.
I'm confused because I thought that there were only 3 when Mike says there are 11 different owners. I thought there were
No,
three.
No,
there's
no.
11 properties,
Okay, but are they
parcels.
And they're gonna
parcels, but
sell
they,
them. And those three
but
people are
they're
gonna
all-
sell those properties, Elizabeth.
I see, okay.
It's, 11 parcels.
Okay, anybody else got comments?
Yeah, if you look at the top of the GEIS, they have the actual numbers of the properties, how they're, where they are and what.
So Elizabeth, there are 11 different sections. And in the DGIS, they say the sponsors are going to sell those things. It could be that 11 different owners come in there. And so the question is, how do you create conformity in this PDD or this
Oh,
zoning
okay.
to
Once
cover
the-
all those different situations that are going to be sold off?
Yeah, I see.
Mary?
I'm struggling how to frame it because it's outside of my normal area of conversation, but the way the zoning sections are being presented is not an organic approach to zoning. So the very nature of how this PDD is being presented is creating a segmented approach instead of an overall plan. And again, I'm sort of quoting different sources of planners who have criticized what's been presented as not being a cohesive vision. And then Catskill Mountain Keeper has said they've not done an adequate job of separating out what is absolutely open space. And then the remaining space is what is available for being developed. And then how to incorporate all of that into our existing zoning overlay districts, such as the aquifer and the aquifer watershed protection overlay districts. So that's not sort of a question, but it's a topic of concern.
Yes, well, it does describe what's happening. The last question is, you've got this segmented 11 segments, you know, if 11 different people or even 3 different people buy all the section, how do you oversee it? And the reason that happened is because it was segmented in this way that wasn't necessarily, as you use the word organic, you know, didn't work with each other necessarily. So it's kind of a precursor to the other question about the segmentation. Okay. Anybody else have anything to add?
Well, just going back to the trees, I did read that they said they would cut down trees that had invasive vines on them.
Yeah.
So that could be anything. So I think that was their workaround for getting rid of trees they didn't want. So
well, we do have a question about that tree removal.
Well, so you cut the vines, you don't cut the trees. So, but this has been helpful, Skip. Thank you.
Okay. So we got a few more questions. Is everybody satisfied with these and what we added? You know, we added the thing about the segmentation. We added the thing about comparing sites, amphitheater sites. We added the effects of the outside traffic study. Maybe the traffic study isn't good enough, and what happens to Berkeley Heights and you know the village and all that. What else did we do? Well, it'd be in the notes. All right, overlay maps. So we could compare size and like we look at Berkeley Heights and we put the map of Winston Farm over there to get an idea of comparison. That's the same thing with the amphitheater. So you get an idea of what area you're talking about. And so a better idea of the impact, you know, in an area. So.
Yes, I just wanted to comment on what Mary was saying, this sort of segmentation and non-organic view of zoning. And I think, I mean, this may or may not be realistic, but if there's more of a sense of cluster housing around and not houses, you know, right side by side, cluster housing would be preferable, I think. I mean, in an urban context, it was Jane Jacobs' idea of, you know, preserving when land was even more scarce. But I think cluster housing would be a good approach to zoning.
Why
add to-
Mike and I like the TND? Look at that map. Look
Yeah.
at map number 4,
Okay,
because that clusters houses. It's
okay,
more like the Eastdale thing in Poughkeepsie, which is, I wouldn't want to live there, but it does have these 4-story, I don't know, what do we figure? There was going to be 700, you know, living units, you know, in 3 or 4-story buildings that would provide for low income and affordable, could provide for low income and workforce housing, as well as leave 75% of the site open. So,
Mm.
Mary?
So one other thing that they brought up in different alternatives that they rejected was that they were not able to make the amount of financial gain that they had hoped to make.
Well,
Um,
that's,
And so I don't know how we work around that as being not a sufficient excuse for why to not pick different alternatives that have a more limited development.
well, I think what we do as CAC is comment on the environmental effects of what's going on. We're not a
So,
business group.
so if,
It's not, I don't think it's our problem to, I mean, it's what we're charged with, you look on the town website, what we're charged with is overseeing environmental effects of things happening in the town.
Mhm.
So what we're doing here is considering those environmental effects. Of course, they're going to be pushback, but I don't think that's something that we're charged with dealing with.
right,
It wasn't our, you know, if they bought the place for $4 million and they can't make $50 million on it, that's really not part of our concern. We're not, you know, community development. You know, we're not the Community Development Commission. If it were, then that would be part of our purview, and we'd have to consider that.
of course, but I guess I'm
So-
saying if the reason they're not accepting the traditional neighborhood or the, I think it's alternative 6 that says no building above 250 feet. And the reason they didn't take that alternative seriously was purely financial reasons. If
Well,
we're
fine.
looking at that alternative as saying that's environmentally a more palatable or a better way to go,
We're
then
going to have to
that's
throw that on Zach and the town board, because all we're, you know, our job is to, you know, find out what's going to happen environmentally and say, hey, here's what we think, you know, these different alternatives, what these different alternatives, and you should consider traffic. You consider, you know, quality of life. You should consider, you know, emissions. That's
So I'm saying
that's where
alternative-
we're at.
So I'm
Mike?
saying alternative 6 has less of an environmental impact, and therefore the CAC could strongly recommend that that alternative be strongly considered, regardless of why it's not being considered.
Mike?
Yeah, well, that was one of my points, is the question that we can push other alternatives that they have put forward. And what Mary is saying is true, is that one of the criteria of excluding an alternative is it doesn't meet their residential density goals. That's what they're saying.
Okay.
Well, it's not our job to create residential density goals. As far as this commission, it's the effect on the environment and the water and everything else and the quality of life. So I don't think our decision should be based on their need to reach a certain goal of financial success.
Mhm.
And that doesn't mean I don't feel something should happen, because who knows what else could come in, but that's my feeling.
All right, so any other comments on questions we want to put to Adriana next week, next time? Mary?
I'm just curious, Zach, if you have a sense of how the town board is handling the financial side of alternatives being pursued or not pursued, or am I?
Sure. I think your question is a fair one. I respect Skip's position, in the stance that it's not necessarily within the purview of the commission, but I do think the town board has an obligation to explore every alternative with, impartiality to what the financial benefit might be to the developers. I'm certainly all for exploring all the alternatives. I think as the impartial body, our objectives should not be the financial gain should not be the main objective of the town board. If they happen to, make a profit by doing so, then so be it. But I think that should be a byproduct of us doing the right thing and not necessarily, us cavaliering for it.
You're here. Okay, any other questions on questions? Okay, so we'll work these questions up, and Adriana said she would supply us, or it would be available, her comments, and see how much of her comments. She indicated that a lot of the concerns of the original questions we had were part of her concerns too, or their concerns. I'm not sure she was speaking for the whole of Nelson Pope, but in any case, once the town board gets those comments, then we'll get them too. And maybe a lot of our questions will be answered, maybe not. And then we can determine, she's open to come to the our next meeting, and anything that doesn't get covered, then we can, have a discussion with her about that. So that's
Skip, you had asked her that we would receive those comments before she came, right?
Yes.
Good.
She said that the town board would get them October 4th, and she said they would be available to the public after that. Our next meeting's on the 17th. So that gives us 2 weeks to look at them. Although we could make a special meeting to talk to her if you wanted to do it before the October 17th meeting. She's very flexible. She's very willing to engage and very flexible. The only thing she was worried about was the appropriateness of usurping the town board's knowledge of what they thought first. So, and I thought we should respect that. Okay.
Hey,
Okay. So we're going to go on to the next thing, which is the Lower Sopus Stream Management Plan. I put a synopsis. I attached the synopsis to the agenda. We had questions, or even I had questions about it, especially with Quigley's article and everything else. And since I talked to Mary, I talked to Patrick Landaway, who's kind of involved in directing part of this stuff. He wrote a synopsis, which I included there. And I had probably a half an hour discussion with Patrick, who's very, very level-headed. It seems this plan is, first of all, it's not top-down. It's not a demand. It's voluntary, and it's a cooperative partnership with 7 different communities that are involved along the Lower Sopus. And the amount of money, the $2 million that was awarded that they can use, was certainly not enough to do all the projects. But what it was meant to do is leverage other funds to do projects along the Hudson. So I think it's a real open, voluntary situation. And because of what I've written there, I think we should recommend that the town board pass it. Zach has indicated that everybody's pretty much on board with that. So if anybody has any comments on that, let's hear them.
well, I make a motion that we accept it then.
All right, so do we want to put forward I
Yeah.
move that I'll just write a memo. I won't have to do a big thing, that we support the Lower Sopus Stream
Mhm.
Management
Mhm.
Plan. Carol?
She's
Oh,
voting yes.
she's saying aye. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, I'll do that.
Thank you. Thank you.
So Zach, do you have anything else you want to tell us about what's happening with the town board?
Skip, can you come back to me in 2 minutes? I'm a little preoccupied.
Okay,
Thank you.
okay, then
It's
we'll
a
do announcements
diaper.
first. He must be changing diapers or something. So Sarah Hannah sent me this thing that was, there's a shredding project, and I sent you there's an attachment with that's in Kingston. On October 5th from 10 to 1 at the Kingston Public Library, that you can bring all your documents and get them shredded. And it's a high-tech, thing, and it goes, instead of throwing your paper in the landfill, it gets recycled. So if anybody wants to go to that, information is on that thing that I sent there, and you can have
Skip, is
You
there a
bet.
flyer? Is there a flyer for that? Because that's the day we're having the repair cafe, and I could post that flyer at the repair cafe.
Yes,
Some-
it's one
you
of the
might be-
attachments.
And it's in flyer form. I have to look at it.
Well,
again.
I don't know if
Okay.
it's a plot. It's an announcement. So,
I'll pretty it up and post it.
okay, great. I mean, I could ask her.
Great.
No, she does have flyers about it. I've
She
seen
does?
them. I
Okay.
don't know if it was on our.
Or you could talk to her office.
I
or
can
Yeah,
research
get it from
that.
her.
Yeah, I'll research
Yeah.
that. Good.
Yes, yeah.
Kathleen?
Yeah, I just wanted to, I don't know if this is the right place. Are we doing climate smart task force?
Yeah, we
also?
could do, yeah.
I have
The
a truck
original
update.
thought of this is we were gonna have a long discussion with Adriana, so we wanted to, clear everything, but this is a time for updates, and we got another 30 minutes before 7 o'clock, so we got plenty of
Okay.
time left.
Well, then I'll just tell you that we have a signed contract on the truck purchase.
That's great.
And Fred is actually trying to get a corrected contract from the dealer because apparently we have to submit our contract to NYSERDA before we can move ahead with that. And then we apply for the first $25,000 of the grant. But the dealer put the wrong address on it, and he did a few things wrong, and Fred had to send it back twice to get it corrected. So
And we're buying a
anyway,
truck
but we
from them, huh?
did get the NYSERDA contract back very quickly, which was good.
Okay, great.
So we'll be moving ahead with that.
Who was the dealer?
I don't know.
Yeah, no, okay.
I read a thing in I don't know where, maybe a Daily Freeman, that the Kingston Police Department was getting 7 vehicles. I'm not really sure on that, but didn't you mention before that the police department was having trouble finding vehicles?
Yes, when they actually, a couple of departments came up. I think the building department did also need to replace a vehicle, but they could not get, they needed the vehicle right away and they could not get an electric vehicle right away. And as a matter of fact, I'm waiting for a car, a hybrid, which I talked to the dealer in June and they said it would be here in August. And now I'm hearing I won't get it until October. And it's a 23 model hybrid. So they may promise you that you can have something, but then again, you're waiting to get it. So, but the trucks that Fred is interested in, I understand were on the lot.
Oh,
So that's kind of why he wanted to hurry up with it so the dealer wouldn't get annoyed and sell them to somebody else.
Right.
So anyway, my understanding was that they are readily available, and our police department said they would be a candidate for the unmarked cars for electric vehicles, but
Uh-huh.
not the patrol cars, I guess.
mhm.
because they have to be sure that they're ready to go and have enough, energy to
Yeah.
do whatever they have to do in a hurry. So he did say he might, they might be candidates for an electric vehicle. They have 7 unmarked cars.
Uh-huh.
So, and
They-
I did email Greg Chorvis about the Clean Fleets thing through Central Hudson. Because I wanted to find out if he feels that that's the staff there, if they can provide the information that's needed. And I didn't press him on it because of the Garlic Festival. I know they're very busy getting ready for that. So I thought I would revisit that question with him after the Garlic Festival.
Okay, great. Anyway, the reason I brought it up about the Kingston thing is, I don't know what you read in the paper and what the reality is, but it seems like they had a source that they were going to do it. And it might be, I don't know if you municipalities talk to one another about their sources of, vehicles, but it might be
Yeah,
a source that-
Kingston, I believe Kingston is very resourceful. I mean, they have a very active group there, I guess, that works on grants. And right now I'm working on a grant, 2 grants for the animal shelter. So I'm kind of, up to my ears. But the town actually is going to be getting some other people involved in writing grants because I will be probably stepping down next year.
Uh-huh.
And I'm doing a lot of administration for grants that we already have. So that limits, there's just a set amount of time I can work because I have things to take care of in my life. And
really?
I'm not working full time and I don't want to work full time, but I make very good time of the time that I'm there. And today, I mean, when I have a deadline, I was in at 10 o'clock this morning and I left at 5. So that's an intense day for me, and it'll be an intense day tomorrow because I'll be finishing up this application and then I'll be jumping into another one. But there are a couple of things, I mean, just for general knowledge. For instance, some of the culvert work and the bridge grant, Ray Mayone, we had a discussion a while ago that we need subject matter expertise in some of these applications that I do not have. I'm not an engineer. Dennis Larios has been helpful when I've needed some kinds of engineering questions answered. But they are better off hiring someone with subject matter expertise. Like Ray hired an engineer to write the bridge grant and he got it. And the culvert work also for Department of Homeland Security, any kind of flood mitigation grants and things like that. You really need a lot of technical information. They want to know how many gallons are going through the culvert and are you restoring some connectivity for habitat and things like that. And, I don't have that expertise. So my recommendation to Fred is to where you have those kinds of needs to get someone with subject matter expertise. And I realize it's going to cost them a lot more than it costs them to pay me. But they're going to have a better chance at getting a significant grant.
Why I brought the
I know
subject
my
matter-
limits.
Right. Well, again, I wasn't suggesting you do this, but I thought in the discussions before that the police department wasn't getting electric vehicles because they couldn't find them. And then I heard that the Kingston Police Department was buying on them. So it's a possibility that they found them, and not that you should do this.
Well, they
but
may also have been waiting for them a long time too.
Maybe just a piece
You
of
don't know. I know that the one plug-in electric vehicle they have, they can't plug it in because there's a defect in it and it's a manufacturer's defect and whatever model it is, it's defective and there's nothing they can do. The manufacturer hasn't offered a fix or a replacement or anything. So they are using that vehicle, the plug-in electric vehicle, as a gas vehicle.
Just suggesting that it was for the police department, if they wanted to, to find some other source, maybe they could talk to Kingston
Absolutely.
and find out their
Absolutely.
source. That I wasn't suggesting that you
Yeah.
do it. You're already overburdened, but there's a piece of information out there that might be helpful to the police department, plus to us for getting grants if they went ahead and actually found some
Yes,
cars.
we can always contact, and I have contacted the county about different things.
Right. Well, this was
Um,
Kingston. This was Kingston specifically.
Or yeah, Kingston and the county. There are people in the county that will help.
Okay, great. Okay.
Help you locate grants. I've talked to Fred about charging stations. Did he want to install more charging stations? He said not right now. And actually, I attended a webinar from ChargePoint, which has manufactured, they've done all of our charging stations. And they are creating a new charging station that they expect will be available in about 10 years. They're developing it now, and it's going to accommodate no matter what model you have. You'll be able to use that charging station and do a setting that would be appropriate for your car. As far as the older charging stations, they are supposedly going to create an adapter kit. So that'll be something, I guess, that you can purchase and install, and we don't know when that is coming. But they were predicting that this new charging station that would be accommodating to all vehicles would be here in 10 years.
Did you see that the charging station that the county bought that's
Yeah.
solar powered and
Solar.
portable?
Off the grid.
Yep.
Yep.
Portable
No,
and
that's a great idea.
it's was $100,000, but these
Yeah.
cost. What does it cost to put a charging station in, and it's stationary? So, and it's solar powered.
Well, it depends. Some of ours cost more. The one at the tennis courts cost more because they had to run electrical wires there.
Right. Well, that's the
To
point.
accommodate that. It depends on the setup where you're installing it. Like the one at the senior center was right next to the building, so they didn't have to do a lot of work to get electric there. But
Well, that's the point. This has no
fast-
electric lines.
yeah,
It's
and
solar powered.
the fast chargers, we did talk to Sawyer's, was it Sawyer? I think it was Sawyer Savings Bank on Market Street there about doing a fast charger there, and that was abandoned. That would have required a huge expense in actually installing a pole and bringing the line in that they
Wow.
needed.
That's too bad. That's a great location.
Yeah, well, they have a huge parking lot.
I
so
know.
That would have been great.
Right.
But anyway, they decided not to go ahead with it. Even though there was some help from Central Hudson, getting ready to accept it, but.
Okay. So Zach, where are you at?
Yeah, sorry, I was on diaper duty before.
That's what we figured.
So aside from the Winston Farm status, we're a little preoccupied with the Market Street in Glasgow road fixing. I think time is kind of the essence with that. If you guys recall the last year's late fall to early winter that we had with several inches of rain, that road at times was dropping 8 to 12 feet overnight. I believe that this needs to be fixed yesterday. There was a little, I don't want to say hesitation, but a slight discrepancy amongst the board, I think, as to which path forward that we were going to pursue. Our highway superintendent recommended through the recommendation of the town engineer to go with his proposed plan. So I'm thinking that after the engineer spoke at not our last board meeting, but the meeting prior to that, he laid out a pretty reasonable path forward. This does come with a price tag. We're looking into funding opportunities through the Emergency Department of Transportation Fund to help alleviate some costs. But again, this really needs to get fixed. The water damage up there is really going to impose a significant risk, along with the road kind of eroding away. So that's going to eat up a lot of our focus. This hasn't quite been made public yet because we're still waiting for some T's to be crossed and some I's to be dotted, but through the generosity of both Senator Hinchy and Assemblywoman Sarah Hanna's offices, it looks like we've been able to secure about $200,000 in funding for upgrades at JC Field in Berkeley Heights. Much of that work, it seems like we can actually handle in-house, which would be great. Hopefully it'll allow our award to go further, but that's going to entail an all-new baseball field layout, hopefully some blacktop for parking, an all-new basketball court, and then ADA compliant playground upgrades. So a lot's going to be happening over there, I'm hoping within the next 18 months or so. So, be on the lookout for that award to be finalized. Like I said, we're just waiting for some documentation. But those are the biggest things happening right now. Definitely Winston Farm, as time progresses, is going to main focus if it's not everybody's already.
Great, thanks. Linda, you have a comment?
Yeah. Oh, I was gonna take my hand down. Yeah, I just got an email this afternoon, as probably all of you did, from Terry Wood to let her know if we want to be reappointed. And so I just need to know what I'm responding to. I know I was on the Climate Smart Task Force, but I don't know if that also includes the Conservation Advisory Committee. So how am I responding to Terry? I'm new to this. I'm saying yes.
You're on the Climate Smart Task Force. I don't think you're on the CAC, although I think we have an opening because Rob Irizarry resigned.
Okay.
If you would like to be on the CAC, I think you would be a good candidate.
Okay.
And you could just respond to her saying, I would like to be on both. I'm only on one.
Perfect. Okay. Thank you.
They would put your name up. Isn't that right, Zach? Doesn't it have to be okayed by the town board, a new CAC member?
Yeah, we would just put it on the agenda. Obviously, we'll take whatever recommendation and interest there is, especially like you said with Rob's absence. But yeah, we can throw it on the agenda.
Okay. Okay, so that's the answer to that.
Thanks. That's what I needed to know.
Say yes if you're not afraid.
I don't want that office yet. I don't want the responsibility. I'm still new at this game.
Well, I mean, do you want to be on the CAC? I mean,
Oh, absolutely.
okay, well,
Great.
Oh,
Good.
no hesitation. Yeah.
all in favor? All opposed?
Our recommendation.
Okay, there's your
Okay, I
recommendation,
got your
Zach.
recommendation. All right, thank you. Does she need to see those minutes to get that?
Yeah, they'll take tax
Thanks.
work, I'm sure.
Thank you.
Okay, any other issues? Okay, so I'm going to write a memo to well, maybe I can just tell, I guess you do it formally, that we are in favor of the lower
Yeah.
stream project, so. And I'll write up, maybe Mike and I can rewrite these questions and add a couple of questions for
We can
thing,
update.
and then we'll get the I don't know exactly how to do this. I don't know what form her comments will be in. Maybe I'll try to get her comments and get them out to you to see if they, answer any of our questions. And then we'll see if we have residual questions or additional questions, depending on what happens. And have Adriana at the next meeting. Okay?
Okay.
All right.
Thank you for organizing all of that, Skip and Mike. It was
Yeah.
very useful.
Okay, great. I'm glad you appreciate it. Okay, and we're before 7:00. I want that noted.
Okay, I move to adjourn.
Okay. Move to adjourn?
Yeah.
Second.
Okay, second. Okay.
Thank
Thank
you,
you all.
everybody.
Thank
Thank
you.
you, Kevin.
Good night, everybody.
Thanks,
Good night,
Sam.
everybody.
Yeah.
Thanks, Zach.
Bye-bye.
Night.
Night.